She took a boy's life-saving insulin right off his porch and nearly sent him into a coma. Karen Miller, the self-righteous HOA president, thought her rules mattered more than a child's safety and showed no remorse when confronted. But Melissa Carter had proof, a voice that wouldn't stay silent, and a courtroom that finally listened. And just wait until you hear how the shocking suburban power trip unraveled. And why justice, in the end, came crashing down. For Melissa Carter, Creekview Meadows was supposed to be the reward after years of barely holding it together. She had spent most of her adult life in cramped apartments across Houston, buildings that echoed with sirens at night, where neighbors rarely made eye contact, and where each rent increase came with a knot in her stomach. She'd learned to live light, ready to move at a moment's notice. But that kind of life isn't built for raising a sick child. Her son Jason had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at just 6 years old, and since then, Melissa's world had narrowed to a single obsessive focus, keeping him alive. Every day was a balancing act, managing blood sugar, calculating insulin doses, packing emergency kits, praying he wouldn't crash during class or while she was stuck in traffic. There were no breaks, no shortcuts, just the relentless rhythm of survival. But Melissa had never complained, not once, because Jason, bright-eyed, dinosaur-obsessed, endlessly curious, was worth every second of the effort. So when she finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest townhouse in Creekview Meadows, it felt like stepping into another life. The gates, the manicured lawns, the perfectly paved sidewalks. It all whispered of order, stability, control, the very things she'd been chasing since Jason's diagnosis. From the moment they moved in, things finally seemed normal. Jason made friends with the neighbor's twins. He rode his scooter up and down the block while Melissa, coffee in hand, chatted with other parents. The local elementary school had a full-time nurse. The pharmacy was 2 minutes away. She even started sleeping through the night again. Not every night, but enough to notice. There were rules, of course, lots of them. The HOA bylaws were thicker than a phone book. No trash bins left out, no seasonal decorations without approval, grass trimmed to exactly 2 inches. But Melissa didn't mind. Rules meant structure. Structure meant safety. And safety was everything. That's what made her answer the door so politely when a woman with frosted blonde hair, sharp perfume, and a clipboard showed up one Saturday morning. "Hi, I'm Karen Miller, president of the HOA," the woman announced brightly. "I just wanted to personally welcome you to the community. We like to keep things beautiful and peaceful around here." She handed Melissa a folder labeled Creekview Compliance Packet with color-coded tabs and a post-it that read, "Please read thoroughly." Melissa smiled, thanked her, and closed the door, thinking, wow, these people really take this seriously. She had no idea that folder was a warning sign. She had no idea who Karen really was. Because behind the friendly tone and the pastel cardigans was a woman who didn't just enforce rules. She wielded them like weapons. Melissa had no way of knowing that in just a few short weeks, this same woman would walk onto her porch, take something that didn't belong to her, and nearly cost her son his life. But that day, that Saturday, everything still felt normal. And that was the most dangerous illusion of all. At first glance, Karen Miller didn't seem particularly threatening. She had the look of every suburban mom who took PTA meetings a little too seriously, always in neatly pressed capri pants, hair sprayed into submission, lip gloss perfectly matched to her peach-toned blouse. Her sneakers were always clean, her clipboard always present. But make no mistake, Karen Miller was not just a neighbor. She was the self-declared monarch of Creekview Meadows. As president of the HOA board, she took her role to levels that were, let's say, above and beyond. To Karen, the bylaws weren't just guidelines. They were sacred doctrine. A slightly faded American flag? That was a written warning. A Halloween wreath up past November 1st? $50 fine. A child's chalk drawing on the sidewalk? Vandalism. She walked the neighborhood with the intensity of a drill sergeant, jotting down infractions like a human surveillance drone in yoga pants and oversized sunglasses. Some joked she knew every lawn's blade count and measured grass height in her sleep. Others whispered about her compliance journal, a thick leather notebook she kept in her SUV, filled with tabs, timestamps, and photos of violations. Karen smiled to everyone's face. "Oh, hi there, neighbor," she'd chirp while casually photographing your recycling bin placement. But behind that smile was a running list. And once your name was on it, you weren't getting off easily. Most residents learned to tiptoe around her. They adjusted, avoided, apologized. Some families even altered their landscaping just to stay out of her line of fire. Melissa Carter tried to do the same. She trimmed the hedges. She never parked on the street. She even read the entire HOA rulebook cover to cover one night after Jason fell asleep, just to make sure she wasn't missing anything. She wanted peace, not problems. Especially with Jason's condition, she didn't have energy for power games, and for a while, it worked. Karen kept her distance, save for the occasional passive-aggressive flyer slipped into the mailbox. Gentle reminder, all seasonal decor must be removed within 48 hours of holiday conclusion. Thank you. Melissa rolled her eyes. She vented to friends, but she played along, because when you're a single mom with a chronically ill child, sometimes choosing your battles means not choosing them at all. But the thing about people like Karen, they don't need a reason. They just need an opportunity. And one hot afternoon, that opportunity came, sitting in a small cardboard box on Melissa's front porch. The box wasn't big, didn't look like much, but what was inside it would change everything. The air that day felt thick enough to drown in. It was mid-July in Texas. The kind of day where the sun didn't just shine, it scorched. Everything was too hot, too bright, too still. Even the trees stood frozen, their leaves limp with exhaustion. The hum of distant air conditioners filled the silence between the occasional bark of a restless dog or the chirp of cicadas, whining like power lines. Inside her townhome, Melissa was trying to stay ahead of the heat, blinds drawn, fans spinning, water bottles pre-chilled in the fridge. She moved through her afternoon tasks on autopilot, folding laundry, checking Jason's glucose monitor, replying to a work email, until a soft buzz came from her phone. FedEx, your package has been delivered. She exhaled. Relief. That was the one thing she had been waiting for all day. Jason's insulin, his monthly shipment, shipped overnight in a temperature-controlled box, like always. Carefully scheduled, carefully tracked. This medication wasn't optional. It was the thread that kept her son alive and safe day after day. And because they couldn't risk pharmacy delays or faulty storage, Melissa paid extra every month for direct-to-door medical delivery. Only this time, she hadn't heard the knock. She paused, checked the time, 1:45 p.m. She'd been home, in the kitchen. The doorbell hadn't rung. She walked to the front door, barefoot, heart already speeding up slightly. Not from fear, not yet, but from that specific kind of tension a parent knows too well. Something might not be right. She unlocked the door and opened it. The heat hit her like a wall. The concrete outside looked like it was melting. Her eyes scanned the porch. Nothing. No box, no label, no insulated package waiting to be brought inside. Just the dull rectangle of her welcome mat and the hum of cicadas in the silence. Her stomach tightened. She looked to the sides of the porch. Maybe it had been tucked somewhere, behind the planter, against the wall. Still nothing. She checked the delivery app again. Status, delivered, left at front door. Her breath caught. Her fingers moved quickly now, tapping open the doorbell camera app. She rewound the footage a few minutes, watching the front view of her porch. A shaky hand, shallow breathing. There it was, the FedEx truck pulling up, a young man in uniform stepping out. He carried the white and blue medical-grade box to her door, placed it carefully on the mat, and snapped a photo for proof. Then he turned, got back in the van, and drove off. Melissa held her breath as the footage continued. At first, nothing. Then, 37 seconds later, another figure appeared on the edge of the screen. Karen Miller, wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a reusable water bottle like she was just out for a sunny stroll. Her hair was perfect, her steps casual. She didn't hesitate, didn't pause. She walked straight up to the porch like she belonged there, like she owned it. And then, without a second of doubt, she bent down and picked up the box. Melissa's breath hitched in her throat. On the video, Karen barely glanced around. She didn't knock. She didn't check the label. She didn't leave a note. She didn't even look curious. She simply turned and walked off with the package clutched to her chest, like it was hers, like it was nothing. Melissa stood frozen, watching the clip again and again, unable to look away, her mind refusing to accept what she'd just seen. She felt it. A surge of confusion, then disbelief, then an icy wave of dread washing over her from head to toe. That wasn't just a box. That was her son's insulin. A lifeline, stolen, without a word, in the middle of a 102-degree day. And the woman who took it was the one person in the neighborhood who seemed to think she could do whatever she wanted. Something twisted hard in Melissa's gut, a mix of panic, rage, and something else, a cold, heavy understanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional, and she knew exactly where to go. Melissa didn't even feel the burning pavement under her feet. She was already moving, fast, bare feet slapping against the hot sidewalk as she stormed down the street, not caring who saw her. She barely registered the sun scorching her skin or the sweat dripping down her back. All she could hear was the thundering of her own heartbeat and the echo of that doorbell video replaying over and over in her mind. Karen taking the box. Her hands were shaking, fists clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. Her voice, when it finally came, was trembling with fury and panic. She rang the doorbell. Once, twice, then started pounding on the door. The door creaked open with infuriating calm, and there she was. Karen Miller, wearing a pastel blouse, hair perfectly sprayed in place, a pair of iced tea earrings dangling from her ears like some sick joke. She looked like she'd just come back from a tennis brunch. And she was smiling. "Melissa," she said smoothly, as if they were neighbors discussing flower beds, not stolen medication. "I was expecting you." Melissa's jaw tightened. "Where is it?" Her voice cracked with urgency. "Where's the package?" Karen blinked slowly, cocking her head to the side like she was being asked to explain why the sky was blue. And then, with a tone that made Melissa's blood run cold, she said, "You're welcome." Melissa froze. Karen continued, calm and condescending. "I removed the package from your porch. HOA guidelines clearly state that unattended deliveries are a safety risk. We've had incidents, porch pirates. It's really for everyone's protection." Melissa's lips parted, but for a moment no words came out. Was she serious? "That was my son's insulin." Melissa's voice broke. "He has type 1 diabetes. That medication needs to stay cold. He could die without it." There was a beat, a flicker of something behind Karen's eyes, but it wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. She shrugged. "Then maybe next time, try to be a little more responsible." Melissa took a step back, stunned. The wind had been knocked out of her. There was no apology, no recognition, no shame. Karen had known, or had been told, and she simply didn't care. She turned and shut the door in Melissa's face. That sound, the click of the latch, echoed louder than any scream. Melissa stood there for several seconds, frozen. Her mouth was dry, her vision tunneled. And then she ran. She sprinted back to her house, adrenaline and dread surging through her veins. She threw open the side storage cabinet near the porch. And there it was, the box, tucked away like trash, placed carelessly in a plastic bin that was practically steaming from the afternoon sun. She grabbed it. The box was warm, too warm. Inside, the ice packs were half melted. The temperature indicator had turned gray, a clear sign that the internal contents had risen above the safety threshold. She pulled out the insulin vials. They were cloudy, compromised, useless. She couldn't think. She couldn't breathe. She called the pharmacy, begged them for a same-day refill. But it was late, almost closing time, and the backup vials in her fridge were only partial. Jason was quiet that evening. Too quiet. He laid on the couch, pale and lethargic, refusing food. Melissa checked his blood sugar. The number on the monitor made her throat close. 412. She gave him what insulin she could, tried to stabilize him, but nothing worked. He started to tremble. Sweat pooled at his temples. His eyes got glassy. Melissa didn't wait. She scooped him into her arms, 11 years old, growing fast, but still her baby, and carried him to the car. She drove like her hands weren't even touching the wheel, like her foot was fused to the gas pedal. The ER doors opened automatically as she burst inside, screaming his name. That night, Jason was hooked up to IVs, monitors. Nurses moved quickly, efficiently. One of them looked her in the eye and said the words that would never stop echoing in her head. Another hour, and he might not have made it. Melissa didn't sleep. She sat by his bed watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. And through the storm of guilt and fear and fury, one thought hardened like steel in her gut. Karen Miller was going to answer for this, not with a warning, not with a neighborly conversation, not with a petty fine. This time, Karen had gone too far, and Melissa was going to make sure the whole world knew it. It was 11:52 p.m. when Melissa found herself sitting in a cold, plastic chair beside her son's hospital bed. The world outside felt 1,000 miles away. Here, everything was quiet. Too quiet, except for the steady beeping of monitors, the low hum of machines, the soft rustle of nurses moving down sterile white hallways. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they had no idea a child's life had been hanging by a thread just minutes earlier. Jason was pale, too pale. His small body looked swallowed up by the hospital gown and the tangled tubes snaking across his arms, electrodes on his chest, an IV line in his hand. A nurse had just finished taping down a glucose monitor when the doctor walked in. Mid-30s, no nonsense, eyes tired from a long shift. He didn't soften the blow. "Your son was minutes away from slipping into a diabetic coma," he said plainly, like stating the weather. "If you'd arrived any later, we could be having a very different conversation." Melissa couldn't breathe. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. A different conversation. What did that mean? A different what? A toe tag? A morgue visit? Her vision blurred. She looked at Jason, eyes closed, cheeks clammy, breathing shallow. He was stable now, the doctor assured her, but they needed to monitor him closely through the night. The insulin he'd received from the emergency stock had done its job, this time. Melissa sat there, hunched forward, elbows on her knees, her face buried in her trembling hands. She couldn't stop shaking. The guilt tore through her first. I should have checked the door sooner. I should have had more backups. I should have yelled louder. I should have... Then came the fear, cold, gnawing, paralyzing fear. What if she hadn't had her phone on her? What if Jason had gone to sleep early, his sugar quietly climbing as she folded laundry, completely unaware? What if she'd assumed he was just tired, just fighting off a cold, and waited till morning? She could have woken up to silence, to stillness. But then came the fury, hot and sharp and unrelenting, because this wasn't a freak accident. This wasn't her forgetting a dose or a pharmacy running late. No, someone made a choice, a conscious, deliberate decision. To take, to interfere, to endanger Karen. Melissa's hands curled into fists. A nurse came in to check Jason's vitals and offered her a water bottle. Melissa took it, whispered "thank you," then hesitated. She felt the words rise in her throat before she even fully decided to speak them. "I need to tell you something," she said. The nurse paused. Melissa told her everything, the doorbell footage, the delivery, the porch, the woman who took it. She told her about the box, how it sat in the heat for hours, how it spoiled, how Jason collapsed not long after. When she finished, the nurse was no longer moving. She just stared at Melissa, mouth slightly open. "That wasn't an accident," Melissa said quietly. She knew what it was. I told her, and she didn't care. The nurse didn't try to mask her reaction. "That's not just reckless," she said firmly. "That's criminal." Melissa nodded slowly, staring at the wall but not really seeing it. "You need to report this." The words felt like a command and a lifeline. Melissa didn't say anything in response. She didn't need to. She just looked back at Jason, too, and swore silently, with every inch of her being, that this wouldn't be the end of it, because when someone endangers your child, you don't just forgive, you fight. Melissa didn't waste time. By 8 a.m. the next morning, she was standing in the lobby of the Creekview Police Department, holding a flash drive in one hand and her son's hospital paperwork in the other. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow from a sleepless night, but her voice, when she spoke, was unwavering. "I'm here to report a theft," she said, "and child endangerment." At first, the officer behind the desk gave her the standard line. "Sounds like a civil HOA matter." But that changed the moment he opened the video file. Karen Miller, on camera, calmly walking up, removing the package without permission. No hesitation, no confusion. And then the ER report, showing Jason's insulin was compromised, and his life had been in danger. That wasn't civil. That was criminal. Karen was brought in for questioning that afternoon. She was all polite smiles and dismissive phrasing. "I was enforcing HOA rules," she explained. "Unattended deliveries are a security risk. I moved the box to prevent theft. I didn't do anything wrong." But the law saw it differently. The insulin was federally regulated. Karen had no medical authority, no legal right to touch it. Her actions directly led to a child being hospitalized. Within 48 hours, the district attorney filed formal charges: theft of prescription medication, child endangerment, criminal negligence. For the first time, Karen's confident facade began to crack. She wasn't protected by her clipboard anymore. She wasn't just a neighborhood nuisance. She was now, officially, a defendant in a criminal case. And for Melissa, it wasn't about winning. It was about making sure no one else's child would ever be put at risk by Karen Miller again. This was war, and she had just fired the first shot. It didn't take long for the story to explode. What began as a short segment on local news, HOA president charged after confiscating child's insulin, quickly spiraled into something bigger. The headline hit a nerve, and within 24 hours, the phone lines at the station lit up. People had stories, lots of them. Neighbors from all corners of Creekview Meadows, and even some who had moved away, came forward with accounts of Karen Miller's reign of petty tyranny. She'd fined families for wind chimes, Christmas lights, garden hoses left on driveways. She removed patio furniture without notice. One man claimed she threatened him over a non-regulation mailbox. Another woman said Karen once cut the cord to her porch string lights in broad daylight, but the one that went viral. "She came into my backyard and took my garden gnome," a woman said. She said it violated HOA aesthetics. It was absurd, but it was real. Karen hadn't been managing a neighborhood. She'd been controlling it, hiding behind the rule book, twisting regulations to suit her own obsession with order and authority. And now, those same rules she once used as weapons, they couldn't protect her anymore. What Melissa had thought was an isolated act turned out to be a pattern. A long, carefully curated history of intimidation, finally unraveling under the weight of the truth. For the first time in years, the neighborhood wasn't afraid of Karen Miller. They were done whispering, and the world was finally listening. The courtroom was standing room only. Neighbors who once feared Karen Miller now filled the benches, whispering quietly behind folded hands. Journalists lined the back wall, pens poised. A mother sat in the front row, holding her son's hand, not as a victim, but as a witness. Not just to what had happened, but to what justice could look like. Karen entered, flanked by her attorney, wearing a crisp beige suit and a string of pearls that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was immaculate, her makeup carefully done. To anyone who didn't know better, she looked composed, controlled. But then the trial began. Melissa was the first to take the stand. She spoke plainly, no dramatics, just the facts. She told them about Jason, his diagnosis, the daily regimen, the fragility of balance, the constant background fear every parent of a diabetic child lives with. Then she told them about the day the package disappeared, the box that was supposed to keep her son alive. Her voice trembled only once when she described carrying Jason into the ER, watching his chest rise under hospital monitors, wondering if he'd wake up. Then came the video. The prosecution played the footage in full. The courtroom, already tense, went silent. Karen's image appeared on the screen, calm, confident, walking up the porch steps, taking the box. No pause, no check, no concern, just entitlement. When it ended, no one said a word. The judge, a man in his 60s with tired eyes and little patience for excuses, looked at Karen for a long moment. Her attorney spoke of misunderstanding, of confusion, of community duty, but the judge wasn't moved. "This was not enforcement," he said. His voice was steady, final. "This was endangerment, a deliberate, reckless act that put a child's life at risk." He looked directly at Karen. "You are not above the law." 18 months in prison. The words hit the room like a gavel long before the real one came down. Karen didn't cry, not really, but her face cracked, the polished mask slipping just enough to show the fear underneath. No more HOA meetings, no more violation notices, no more clipboard patrols. Just cold walls, steel doors, and silence. Melissa didn't cheer, she didn't smile, she just exhaled, slowly. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt the weight start to lift. Justice had spoken, and this time, it had been heard. The house was smaller. The yard wasn't perfectly trimmed. The neighbors weren't obsessed with matching mailboxes, and Melissa had never felt more at home. After the trial, she packed their lives into boxes, signed the lease on a modest, tree-lined rental across town, and left Creekview Meadows behind. No gate codes, no compliance memos, no clipboard tyrants. Just quiet. Just freedom. Jason, now fully recovered, was back to riding his scooter and laughing at corny knock-knock jokes. His blood sugar levels were steady. His spirit, once dimmed by fear and fatigue, was bright again. And Melissa, she was healing too, slowly, in her own way. Once the adrenaline faded and the noise died down, what remained wasn't vengeance. It was clarity, a clear understanding of how thin the line between normal and nightmare really is, and how injustice doesn't always wear a villain's mask. Sometimes it smiles from across the cul-de-sac. Sometimes it runs the HOA. But peace didn't mean forgetting. Melissa didn't want to forget. So she started sharing. She began volunteering with parents of diabetic children, teaching them how to advocate, prepare, protect. Not just from medical emergencies, but from the people who pretend to care while quietly putting lives at risk. She told her story not to reopen wounds, but to remind others that even in the calmest neighborhoods, complacency is dangerous. Because justice doesn't always arrive on its own. Sometimes it needs a voice. Sometimes it needs a witness. Sometimes it needs a mother who won't back down. And sometimes a Karen needs a courtroom.